The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom window, watching the early preparations below. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived 3 days ago. The weight of the paper felt heavier than any crown she had ever worn. William was leaving for a 6-month diplomatic mission to establish new trade relationships across Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. It was a crucial assignment that could reshape Britain's economic future, but it meant the longest separation the couple had faced since their wedding. Catherine understood the importance of his work, yet her heart ached at the thought of managing royal duties, their 3 children, and public appearances without her steadfast partner by her side. The palace staff moved with quiet efficiency, loading William's belongings into the waiting vehicles. Catherine watched as his personal secretary double-checked the itinerary, while security personnel conducted their final sweeps. Everything appeared normal from the outside, but she knew this departure would test their relationship in ways they had never experienced before. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had been told about their father's extended trip, but the youngest struggled to understand why Daddy would be gone for so long. The previous evening, Louis had clung to William during bedtime stories, asking repeatedly when he would return. Charlotte, always perceptive beyond her years, had noticed her mother's subdued mood and offered extra hugs throughout the week. Catherine remembered their private conversation 2 weeks earlier, when William first shared the news about his assignment. They had sat in their private sitting room at Kensington Palace, the fire crackling softly as rain tapped against the windows. William had explained how the Prime Minister personally requested his involvement, emphasizing the delicate nature of the negotiations and the trust placed in his diplomatic skills. "You know I wouldn't choose this if there were any alternative," William had said, reaching for her hands. "But these trade agreements could secure Britain's economic stability for the next generation. It's bigger than us, Catherine. It's about the future we're building for our children and the country." Catherine had nodded, understanding the gravity of his words even as her heart protested the separation. She had always known that their positions came with sacrifices, but this felt particularly challenging. The timing coincided with several major royal events, including state visits and charity galas that traditionally required their joint presence. As she continued watching from the window, Catherine noticed William emerge from the main entrance, his posture straight and confident despite the early hour. He wore his Navy travel suit, the one she had helped him select years ago for international trips. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the subtle signs that told her he was struggling with this departure as much as she was. Their relationship had always been built on partnership and mutual support. From their university days at St. Andrews through their courtship, engagement, and marriage, they had faced challenges together. The public scrutiny, the pressure of royal duties, and the constant media attention had only strengthened their bond. This separation would be their greatest test yet. Catherine thought about the detailed schedule William's private secretary had prepared for his trip. Official meetings with government officials, visits to cultural sites, participation in economic forums, and countless networking events filled every day of his 6-month itinerary. She knew he would be working tirelessly, representing Britain with the dignity and dedication that had made him such a respected figure on the international stage. Meanwhile, her own schedule would intensify significantly. As the remaining senior royal in residence, Catherine would need to cover additional engagements, represent the monarchy at state functions, and maintain the public presence that their positions demanded. The Queen Consort had offered support, but Catherine understood that much of the responsibility would fall on her shoulders. The thought of managing everything alone felt overwhelming, yet she also recognized it as an opportunity to prove her capabilities as a future queen. The British public had always admired her grace under pressure, and this period would showcase her independence and strength. Still, the professional opportunities did little to ease the personal cost of William's absence. Their love story had captivated the world, from their fairy tale wedding watched by millions to their genuine affection displayed during public appearances. The media often portrayed them as the modern face of the monarchy, a couple who balanced tradition with contemporary values. Their relationship appeared effortless to outsiders, but Catherine knew it required constant work, communication, and compromise. The security detail began their final preparations, checking communication equipment and reviewing departure protocols. Catherine realized she had been standing at the window for nearly an hour, lost in thought and dreading the moment of goodbye. She needed to compose herself before joining William for their private farewell, away from the cameras and public attention. She walked to her dressing table and checked her appearance one final time. Her stylist had suggested a simple but elegant outfit for the day, something that would photograph well during the official departure ceremony scheduled for later that morning. The public would watch their goodbye, analyzing every gesture and expression for signs of emotion or strain. Catherine applied a light touch of makeup, knowing the cameras would capture every detail. She chose jewelry that held personal meaning, the earrings William had given her for their first wedding anniversary, and the bracelet that had belonged to his mother, Princess Diana. These small connections to their shared history would provide comfort during the difficult months ahead. As she prepared to leave her room, Catherine took one last look at their wedding photo on the bedside table. The joy and hope captured in that image reminded her of their commitment to support each other through all challenges. This separation was temporary, but their love and partnership were permanent, foundations that would sustain them both. During the difficult time ahead, the sound of footsteps in the corridor indicated that palace staff were beginning the final departure preparations. Catherine took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face the day that would change everything for the next 6 months. Her strength and composure would be tested, but she was determined to prove herself worthy of the crown that would one day rest upon her head. Catherine walked slowly down the grand staircase of Windsor Castle, her hand gliding along the polished banister that had been touched by generations of royals before her. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting colorful patterns on the walls from the stained glass. Each step brought her closer to the inevitable goodbye that would separate her from William for half a year. In the private family quarters, William was having his final breakfast with their 3 children. Catherine could hear Louis's animated chatter from down the hallway, his young voice filled with questions about airplanes and faraway countries. George, now old enough to understand the weight of royal duties, sat quietly beside his father, occasionally asking thoughtful questions about the importance of the mission. Charlotte, their middle child, had inherited Catherine's intuitive nature and seemed to sense the emotional undercurrent of the morning. She stayed close to her father, helping him fold his napkin and straightening his tie with the serious concentration of a much older child. These small gestures showed her awareness that something significant was happening. William looked up as Catherine entered the breakfast room, and their eyes met across the space filled with morning sunlight and children's voices. In that moment, the reality of their separation hit them both with renewed force. They had discussed the logistics, prepared for the challenges, and made arrangements for communication, but nothing could minimize the emotional impact of actually saying goodbye. The royal nannies and household staff moved discreetly around the family, ensuring the children's routines continued normally while giving the couple space for their private moments. Years of experience had taught them to balance professional duties with respect for the family's personal needs, especially during difficult transitions like this one. After breakfast, William spent individual time with each child in their playroom. He read Louis a favorite story about adventure and brave knights, promising to send postcards from every country he visited. With Charlotte, he looked at a world map, tracing the route of his journey and explaining the different cultures he would encounter. George, mature beyond his years, asked about the economic importance of the mission and listened seriously to his father's explanations. Catherine watched these interactions from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride at William's dedication to maintaining strong connections with their children, despite his demanding schedule. He had always been a hands-on father, insisting on being present for bedtime stories, school events, and family activities whenever possible. This separation would be as difficult for him as it would be for them. The children's tutors arrived for their morning lessons, providing a natural transition away from the emotional farewells. George and Charlotte understood they needed to continue their studies while their father was away, and Louis would maintain his preschool routine with additional attention from his nannies. The palace had arranged for video calls during appropriate times, considering the significant time zone differences William would encounter. In their private study, William and Catherine reviewed the detailed communication schedule his private secretary had prepared. They would have secure video calls twice weekly, text messages when schedules permitted, and emergency contact protocols for urgent situations. The technology would help bridge the physical distance, but both knew it couldn't replace being together. Catherine had prepared a collection of letters for William to open during difficult moments of his trip. Each envelope was marked with specific occasions. Open when you miss home. Read before your first major speech. For when you feel overwhelmed. She had spent hours writing these messages, pouring her love and encouragement onto paper that would travel with him across the world. William presented Catherine with a similar gift, a leather journal filled with his thoughts, memories, and promises for their future together. Read one page each week, he said softly. It will remind you that even though I'm physically far away, my heart and thoughts are always with you and our family. They discussed the major events Catherine would handle alone during his absence. State dinners, charity galas, official visits from foreign dignitaries, and numerous public appearances filled her calendar. While she had always been a confident public speaker and graceful hostess, managing these responsibilities without William's support would require all her strength and skill. The media attention would intensify during William's absence, with every public appearance analyzed for signs of stress or difficulty. Catherine knew she would need to project confidence and competence while privately dealing with loneliness and increased responsibilities. The royal family's reputation depended on her ability to maintain their high standards of public service. Their private moments became precious as the departure time approached. They walked through the castle gardens where they had shared countless conversations about their future and their hopes for their children. The early spring flowers were beginning to bloom, a reminder that life continued its natural cycles even during times of change and challenge. William shared his concerns about missing important family moments during his absence. Louis was at an age where he changed rapidly, and William worried about losing precious time during his son's development. Charlotte had several school performances scheduled, and George would be participating in his first official royal engagement. These milestones would happen without his physical presence. Catherine assured him that she would document everything thoroughly, creating detailed photo albums and video recordings so he could feel connected to their children's experiences. She promised to maintain their family traditions and ensure the children understood their father's important work, even during his absence. As they prepared for the official departure ceremony, Catherine helped William with his formal attire. The simple act of adjusting his medals and smoothing his jacket felt both familiar and heartbreaking. How many times had she performed this ritual before other official engagements? Today, however, carried the weight of months of separation. The palace staff began their final preparations for the media coverage of William's departure. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically. Photographers checked their equipment and journalists prepared their questions. The world would witness their goodbye, transforming a deeply personal moment into a public event that would be analyzed and discussed globally. Catherine applied her final touches of makeup, knowing that every expression would be captured and scrutinized. She chose a dress in William's favorite shade of blue, a subtle way of carrying him with her through the difficult day ahead. Her jewelry was carefully selected for its personal significance rather than its monetary value. The sound of approaching vehicles indicated that the official departure time was near. Catherine took a deep breath, preparing herself for the most challenging goodbye of their marriage. In a few hours, William would be thousands of miles away, beginning a mission that would test their love, their partnership, and their commitment to serving their country above their personal desires. The grand courtyard of Windsor Castle filled with an atmosphere of formal ceremony and personal emotion as dignitaries, palace officials, and media representatives gathered for William's official departure. The ancient stones seemed to absorb the weight of the moment, having witnessed countless royal farewells throughout centuries of British history. Today would add another chapter to that long tradition of duty and sacrifice. Catherine stood beside William on the steps of the castle, her composure perfect, despite the turmoil in her heart. The couple had mastered the art of public appearances over their years of royal service, but this occasion tested their abilities to separate personal feelings from official responsibilities. Cameras captured every angle, every expression, every gesture as the world watched their goodbye. The formal ceremony began with speeches from government officials emphasizing the importance of William's diplomatic mission. The Prime Minister spoke about strengthening international relationships and securing Britain's economic future through strategic partnerships. Trade ministers outlined the potential benefits of the agreements William would negotiate, presenting the separation as a necessary investment in the country's prosperity. William addressed the gathered crowd with the confidence and gravitas that had made him such an effective royal representative. He spoke about the honor of serving his country, the importance of the mission, and his commitment to achieving successful outcomes for Britain. His voice remained steady and strong, but Catherine noticed the slight tension in his jaw that indicated his emotional struggle. The media asked carefully prepared questions about the trip's objectives, the timeline for negotiations, and the expected outcomes. William answered with diplomatic skill, providing enough information to satisfy public interest while maintaining appropriate confidentiality about sensitive discussions. Catherine admired his ability to balance transparency with discretion. Behind the formal proceedings, palace staff coordinated the final logistics of William's departure. Security teams conducted last-minute briefings. Communication specialists tested international phone systems, and travel coordinators confirmed arrival schedules in multiple time zones. The complexity of royal travel required months of preparation and flawless execution. Catherine's private secretary approached discreetly to review her modified schedule for the coming months. With William absent, her responsibilities would expand significantly, requiring careful coordination to ensure all royal duties were properly covered. She would represent the monarchy at events traditionally attended by both of them, doubling her public appearances and official obligations. The children watched from a private balcony above the courtyard, accompanied by their nannies and security detail. Catherine occasionally glanced upward, catching glimpses of their young faces pressed against the windows. Louis waved enthusiastically whenever he saw his parents, while George and Charlotte observed with the serious attention they had learned was appropriate for official ceremonies. As the formal speeches concluded, the moment for personal farewells arrived. The media respectfully maintained their distance, recognizing the need for privacy during the couple's final minutes together. Palace protocol allowed for brief personal interaction before William's departure to the airport, a small concession to their human needs within the rigid structure of royal duty. William and Catherine walked together toward the waiting vehicle, their hands briefly touching in a gesture that conveyed volumes about their relationship. Years of marriage had taught them to communicate through subtle touches, meaningful glances, and shared understanding that transcended words. These skills would be crucial during the months of separation ahead. The couple paused beside the official car, surrounded by security personnel and travel staff, who discreetly maintained their professional distance. This moment balanced public visibility with personal intimacy, allowing the world to witness their farewell while preserving some measure of privacy for their emotional exchange. Catherine straightened William's collar one final time, her fingers lingering on the fabric as she memorized the feeling of caring for him in person. These small acts of daily life, adjusting his clothes, fixing his hair, sharing quiet moments of connection, would be impossible during his absence. She would miss the simple intimacy of physical presence more than grand gestures or dramatic declarations. William placed his hands gently on Catherine's shoulders, looking directly into her eyes with an expression that conveyed years of love, trust, and partnership. No words were necessary to communicate their mutual support and understanding. They had discussed every aspect of the separation, but this final moment was about connection rather than logistics. The security team indicated that departure time was approaching, but William and Catherine took a few more precious seconds together. The world around them seemed to pause as they shared this intimate goodbye, surrounded by hundreds of observers yet completely focused on each other. Their love story had always been public property, but moments like this belonged entirely to them. Catherine stepped back as William prepared to enter the vehicle, her training in royal protocol, ensuring she maintained appropriate composure for the cameras. Her smile remained warm and supportive, projecting confidence in her husband's mission and pride in his service. The British public needed to see their princess as strong and capable, regardless of her personal feelings. William entered the car with a final wave to the assembled crowd, his professional demeanor intact despite the difficulty of leaving his family. The vehicle's windows were tinted for security reasons, but Catherine knew he was looking back at her even though she couldn't see his face. Their connection transcended physical visibility. The motorcade began moving slowly through the castle grounds toward the main gates, where additional crowds of well-wishers had gathered to send William off on his important mission. Catherine remained on the steps, waving gracefully until the vehicles disappeared from view. The cameras continued recording her composed farewell, creating images that would be broadcast around the world. As the sound of the motorcade faded into the distance, Catherine felt the full weight of William's absence settle upon her shoulders. The formal ceremony was complete, the official responsibilities fulfilled, but now the real challenge began. She would need to manage her expanded duties, care for their children, and maintain her own emotional well-being during the longest separation of their marriage. The gathered crowd began to disperse. Officials returned to their duties and media representatives prepared their reports for global distribution. Catherine remained on the castle steps for a few more moments, watching the empty courtyard and processing the reality that William was truly gone. The next time she stood in the same spot, 6 months would have passed, and they would both be changed by their experiences during the separation. Palace staff approached respectfully to escort Catherine inside, where her first official engagement as William's sole representative awaited. There would be no time for private grief or extended reflection. Royal duty demanded immediate attention, and she would need to prove herself capable of meeting every challenge that lay ahead. 3 months into William's diplomatic mission, Catherine stood in her private office at Kensington Palace, reviewing the substantial pile of correspondence that had accumulated throughout her intensified schedule. The autumn sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across documents from various charitable organizations, government ministries, and international diplomatic missions that now required her individual attention. Her desk displayed photographs from William's recent activities in Singapore and Thailand, where he had successfully negotiated preliminary trade agreements that exceeded initial expectations. The images showed him meeting with government officials, touring manufacturing facilities, and participating in cultural ceremonies that honored both British traditions and local customs. His diplomatic skills had opened doors that could benefit Britain's economy for generations. The separation had proven more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Video calls helped maintain their connection, but technical difficulties, time zone complications, and demanding schedules often interfered with their planned conversations. Catherine had learned to cherish brief text messages and voice recordings that William sent during his rare quiet moments between official obligations. Their children had adapted to their father's absence with the resilience that never failed to amaze Catherine. George had thrown himself into his studies with increased determination, telling his tutors that he wanted to understand international relations so he could help his father when he returned. Charlotte had become Catherine's unofficial assistant, helping organize family schedules and offering emotional support with wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Louis, the youngest, had struggled most with understanding why his father couldn't simply come home for bedtime stories and weekend adventures. Catherine had established new traditions to fill the void, including virtual story times when William's schedule permitted and special outings that created positive memories during this difficult period. Catherine's own transformation during the separation had surprised everyone, including herself. The increased responsibilities had revealed leadership capabilities that she hadn't fully realized she possessed. State dinners, charity galas, and official visits that previously required William's presence were now managed entirely under her direction, and she had excelled at every challenge. The British media had initially questioned whether Catherine could maintain royal standards without William's support, but her performance had silenced all critics. International newspapers praised her grace under pressure, her diplomatic skills during foreign minister visits, and her ability to represent British values with authenticity and warmth that resonated with global audiences. Her private secretary entered with the afternoon schedule, which included a video conference with environmental ministers from 3 European countries, a meeting with the board of directors from her patronage organizations, in preparation for the following day's state visit from the Norwegian royal family. The pace was relentless, but Catherine had found strength she didn't know she possessed. The most difficult moments came late at night, when royal duties were complete and the children were asleep. The silence of their bedroom, once shared with William, felt overwhelming, despite the luxury of their surroundings. Catherine had developed coping strategies, including evening walks through Kensington Gardens and video calls with close friends who provided emotional support outside the formal structure of royal life. Letters from the public had increased dramatically since William's departure, with thousands of people expressing admiration for Catherine's strength and dedication. Young women particularly seemed inspired by her example of balancing professional responsibilities with family commitments. These messages provided encouragement during challenging days and reminded her that her efforts were noticed and appreciated. The Queen Consort had become an invaluable mentor during this period, sharing wisdom gained from decades of royal service and offering practical advice for managing the increased workload. Their relationship had deepened significantly, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of the unique pressures faced by women in their positions. Meanwhile, William's mission had encountered unexpected developments that extended certain negotiations beyond their original timeline. Political changes in two countries had required additional diplomatic efforts, and new opportunities had emerged that could significantly benefit British interests. His dedication to achieving the best possible outcomes meant accepting longer separations and more complex challenges. Their communication had evolved during the separation, becoming more intentional and meaningful than the casual conversations of daily life together. They discussed not just immediate concerns but deeper questions about their relationship, their goals for their family, and their vision for their future roles within the monarchy. The forced distance had created space for reflection and growth that might not have occurred otherwise. Catherine had also developed a stronger individual identity, separate from her role as William's wife. While she valued their partnership deeply, the months of independent royal service had proven her capability to stand alone when necessary. This confidence would strengthen their relationship when William returned and enhance her effectiveness as a future queen. The children's video calls with their father had become highlight events of each week, carefully scheduled around his diplomatic obligations and their school activities. William made extraordinary efforts to maintain his involvement in their lives, reading bedtime stories via video connection, helping with homework through screen sharing, and participating virtually in school presentations. International media coverage of the royal separation had been surprisingly positive, with many outlets praising the couple's dedication to duty over personal comfort. Their marriage was portrayed as a partnership strong enough to withstand temporary separation in service of larger goals. This narrative had enhanced public perception of the monarchy's relevance and commitment to serving British interests. Catherine's charitable work had expanded during William's absence, as organizations recognized her increased availability and demonstrated leadership capabilities. She had launched 2 new initiatives focused on early childhood development and mental health support, areas where her personal passion could make a significant impact on British society. The approach of winter brought both challenges and anticipation. William's mission was scheduled to conclude in early spring, but the final months would include the most complex negotiations and highest-stakes diplomatic meetings. Catherine would need to maintain her current pace while preparing for their eventual reunion and the readjustment that would follow. Palace staff had begun preliminary planning for William's return ceremony, which would need to balance public celebration with family privacy. The media interest would be intense as the world had followed their separation story and would eagerly document their reunion. Catherine looked forward to that moment while recognizing that their relationship would be forever changed by their months apart. As evening approached, Catherine prepared for her weekly video call with William, scheduled during his morning hours in Southeast Asia. These conversations had become precious anchors in their separated lives, providing connection and comfort across the thousands of miles that divided them. Tonight, they would discuss final preparations for her solo state dinner next week and share the small details of daily life that maintained their intimate bond despite the physical distance. The first day of spring brought unexpected news that would transform the final weeks of William and Catherine's separation. Catherine was reviewing morning briefings in her private study when her private secretary entered with an urgent message from the Foreign Office. William's diplomatic mission had achieved unprecedented success, with breakthrough agreements that exceeded all initial projections, but complications in the final negotiations would extend his stay by an additional 3 weeks. Catherine felt her carefully maintained composure falter for just a moment before royal training reasserted control. 6 months had stretched her emotional reserves to their limits, and the prospect of additional separation felt overwhelming. She had planned every detail of her schedule around William's expected return date, including family celebrations and the resumption of their joint royal duties. The children's reactions varied according to their personalities and ages. George, now seasoned by months of his father's absence, accepted the news with mature understanding but couldn't hide his disappointment. Charlotte, ever empathetic, immediately noticed her mother's subtle tension and offered additional help with household routines. Louis, however, struggled to comprehend why Daddy couldn't simply finish his work and come home immediately. William's voice during their emergency video call that evening carried exhaustion and frustration alongside his determination to complete the mission properly. The final negotiations involved delicate cultural considerations and complex economic structures that required his personal attention. Rushing the process could jeopardize agreements that had taken months to develop and could benefit Britain for decades. "I know this isn't what we planned," William said, his image occasionally flickering due to connection issues in his remote location. "These 3 weeks could determine whether we achieve good agreements or transformative ones. The opportunities that have emerged could change Britain's economic landscape, but they require careful handling." Catherine understood the importance of his work while feeling the personal cost of extended separation. Her own schedule had been carefully crafted to accommodate William's return, and the additional delay would require significant adjustments. State visits, charity events, and family commitments would need to be rearranged, affecting dozens of other people's plans and preparations. The media response to the extension announcement was mixed, with some outlets praising William's dedication to achieving maximum benefit for Britain, while others questioned the personal cost to his family. Catherine found herself defending the decision during public appearances, explaining the importance of completing negotiations properly rather than rushing to meet arbitrary deadlines. Her strength during this challenging period impressed even experienced palace staff who had served the royal family for decades. Catherine's grace under pressure, her ability to maintain royal standards while managing increased responsibilities, and her skillful handling of media attention had elevated her status within the monarchy. She had proven herself capable of independent leadership in ways that would serve her well as future queen. The 3-week extension period became a test of endurance for everyone involved. Catherine's schedule intensified as she covered additional royal obligations that would normally have been shared with William upon his return. International diplomatic missions, state banquets, and charity galas filled her calendar, leaving little time for rest or private reflection. Communication with William became even more precious during this final phase of separation. Their video calls were often brief and interrupted by urgent diplomatic responsibilities, but they made extraordinary efforts to maintain daily contact. Text messages sent during brief moments between meetings became lifelines that sustained their connection across the vast distances. Catherine began experiencing what palace physicians discreetly diagnosed as exhaustion-related stress symptoms. The combination of increased royal duties, single parenting responsibilities, and emotional strain of prolonged separation was taking its toll on her physical health. She maintained her public schedule while privately implementing stress reduction strategies recommended by her medical team. The children adapted to the extension with remarkable resilience, but Catherine noticed subtle changes in their behavior that indicated they were also feeling the strain. George became more serious and responsible, taking on additional family duties that were beyond his years. Charlotte developed closer relationships with her nannies and grandparents, seeking emotional support from available adults. Louis became more clingy and required extra attention. To maintain his emotional security, William's mission achieved several breakthrough moments during the extension period that validated the difficult decision to prolong his stay. Trade agreements that could generate billions in economic activity, cultural exchange programs that would benefit educational institutions, and diplomatic relationships that could influence international politics for years, were all secured through his patient, dedicated work. International media coverage of the royal separation had evolved from initial sympathy to admiration for both William's professional achievements and Catherine's independent success. The couple was portrayed as examples of modern partnership, that could withstand temporary separation in service of larger goals. Their marriage was seen as strong enough to prioritize duty without sacrificing love. Palace preparations for William's eventual return intensified during the final weeks of separation. Security protocols, media management, and family scheduling all required careful coordination to ensure a smooth transition back to joint royal duties. The reunion would be public property, analyzed and celebrated by millions of people who had followed their separation story. Catherine's personal preparations for William's return involved emotional as well as practical considerations. 6 months of independent living had changed her in ways she was still discovering, and she wondered how their relationship would adapt to these changes. Would they seamlessly resume their partnership, or would they need time to rediscover their rhythm together? The children's excitement about their father's return grew more intense as the date approached. They planned surprise welcome activities, created artwork to show him, and practiced stories they wanted to share about their experiences during his absence. Their anticipation helped sustain Catherine during the most challenging final weeks. Letters from William arriving via diplomatic pouch became treasures that Catherine read repeatedly during quiet evening moments. His words expressed love, gratitude for her strength, and anticipation of their reunion. He wrote about missing ordinary moments of family life, from breakfast conversations to bedtime routines, that had seemed unremarkable before their separation. As the final week of William's mission began, Catherine felt a mixture of exhaustion, pride, anticipation, and anxiety. She had proven herself capable of extraordinary independence while maintaining their family and fulfilling expanded royal duties. The reunion would mark not just the end of separation, but the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, built on deeper understanding of their individual strengths and shared commitment to service. The world watched and waited for the farewell that had captivated global attention to transform into a reunion that would complete the story of love tested by distance but strengthened by dedication to something greater than themselves. The morning of William's return dawned crisp and clear, with early spring sunlight streaming across the tarmac at RAF Northolt, where Catherine stood waiting beside the royal aircraft that would bring her husband home. 6 months and 3 weeks of separation were about to end, but the woman who waited was fundamentally changed from the princess who had said goodbye nearly 7 months earlier. Catherine wore a dress in the same shade of blue she had chosen for their farewell, a deliberate connection between the beginning and end of their separation. However, everything else about her presence conveyed the transformation she had undergone. Her posture reflected new confidence earned through months of independent royal service. Her expression showed strength gained from successfully managing challenges she had never faced alone. The children stood beside her, barely containing their excitement, despite royal protocol training that emphasized appropriate public behavior. Louis bounced on his toes, repeatedly asking when Daddy's airplane would appear. Charlotte held a carefully prepared welcome sign she had created with her art teacher, while George stood with mature dignity that reflected his understanding of the moment's significance. Media representatives from around the world had gathered to document the reunion that would complete one of the most closely followed royal stories in recent memory. The separation had captured public imagination, not just because of their celebrity status, but because it represented universal themes of love tested by distance, duty competing with personal desires, and partnerships strengthened through individual growth. Palace staff coordinated the complex logistics of William's arrival with precision developed over months of planning. Security teams conducted final sweeps, communication specialists tested equipment, and protocol officers reviewed procedures for the ceremony that would welcome William home while acknowledging the significance of his diplomatic achievements. Catherine's emotions churned beneath her composed exterior as she watched the horizon for the first glimpse of William's aircraft. Excitement at seeing him again competed with nervousness about how their relationship might have changed. Would they easily resume their intimate partnership, or would they need time to rediscover their connection after months of independent living? The successful completion of William's mission had exceeded all expectations, with trade agreements worth billions of pounds, cultural exchange programs that would benefit both nations for generations, and diplomatic relationships that significantly enhanced Britain's international standing. His patient, thorough approach during the extension period had yielded unprecedented results that validated every difficult day of their separation. As the aircraft appeared in the distance, Catherine felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. The reality of William's return after so many months of video calls and letters seemed almost impossible to believe. Their children pressed closer to her, seeking comfort and sharing excitement as they prepared to be a complete family again. The plane touched down smoothly and taxied toward the waiting reception area, where dignitaries, family members, and media representatives stood ready to welcome William home. Catherine watched the aircraft through eyes that suddenly blurred with tears she had held back for months. The strength that had sustained her through the separation was finally allowing space for vulnerability. William appeared in the doorway of the aircraft, and the sight of him after so many months apart took Catherine's breath away. He looked tired but triumphant, wearing the same confident expression that had sustained him through complex international negotiations. His eyes immediately found Catherine and their children, and his professional composure gave way to unmistakable joy. The formal elements of his return were completed quickly, with brief speeches acknowledging his successful mission and expressing gratitude for his service. Government officials praised his achievements while recognizing the personal sacrifices made by his family during the separation. The ceremony balanced official recognition with understanding that the family needed time for private reunion. When protocol finally permitted personal interaction, William walked directly to Catherine with purposeful steps that covered the distance between them in moments that felt like hours. The world seemed to pause as they approached each other, surrounded by cameras and observers but completely focused on the reunion they had dreamed about for months. Their embrace was gentle at first, as if testing the reality of being together again after so much time apart. Then William pulled Catherine closer, and she felt the familiar comfort of his arms around her, the scent of his cologne, and the solid reality of his presence. Tears that had been controlled for months finally flowed freely as relief and joy overwhelmed her. The children rushed to join their parents' embrace, creating a family circle that excluded the watching world. Louis climbed onto William's shoulders while Charlotte and George pressed close, everyone talking at once and trying to share months of experiences in a few precious moments. The genuine emotion of their reunion created images that would be treasured by the family and remembered by the world. William's whispered words to Catherine were inaudible to observers but brought fresh tears to her eyes and a smile that transformed her entire expression. Whatever he said conveyed his appreciation for her strength, his love for their family, and his gratitude for her support during the most challenging period of their marriage. As they separated slightly to look at each other,
Catherine saw changes in William that reflected his own growth during their time apart.
The confidence gained from successfully handling complex international negotiations, the satisfaction of serving his country effectively, and the wisdom earned from months of independent decision-making had all left their mark. The reunion ceremony concluded with William's promise to provide detailed reports about his mission's achievements while emphasizing his joy at being home with his family. Government officials and media representatives began departing, understanding that the family needed private time to reconnect after their long separation. During the drive back to Kensington Palace, Catherine and William sat close together in the royal car, while their children chattered excitedly about all the things they wanted to show their father. The familiar landscape of London looked somehow different to Catherine, as if she was seeing it through new eyes that had been strengthened by months of independent responsibility. That evening, after the children were settled and official obligations were complete, Catherine and William finally had time for private conversation. They talked through the night, sharing experiences from their separation, discussing how they had both changed, and planning their future together with new understanding of their individual strengths and their partnership's resilience. The separation that had tested their love had ultimately strengthened their relationship in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Catherine had proven her capability as an independent leader, while William had achieved professional success that enhanced his confidence in diplomatic service. Their reunion marked not just the end of a difficult period but the beginning of a new chapter built on deeper mutual respect and shared commitment to their family and their service to Britain. The farewell that had captivated the world had become a reunion that demonstrated The power of love sustained by duty, partnership strengthened by individual growth, and commitment that transcended temporary separation. Their story would inspire others facing similar challenges, while proving that true love could withstand any test when built on foundations of respect, communication, and shared values.